Hello and welcome to Along the Way Life's Journey. I'm Carl Buccellato, your host. Every once in a while, I'll come to you and we'll just chat a little bit, as we've done a few times in the past. You know, I very often look at this world around us and I see the changes that are happening rapidly all the way around the world, and I think to myself, it's amazing how quickly things can change. Seems like only yesterday we had a free nation here. But I'm going to chat with you a little bit about what's been going on in our political scene. Now, someone told me recently maybe I shouldn't talk about politics. It seems to reduce the viewing, and people don't want to see that or hear about that. Well, I can't help that because I'm an American, I'm a patriot, I'm a Christian, and I'm a person who speaks his mind. And there are two things that I will never hesitate to comment on. One is I believe deeply in my soul that Jesus Christ is my Savior, and I will never step away from that. I also believe that this nation, the United States of America, is the finest country ever developed by mankind, ever in the history of mankind. And I see here that in the last few years, there are people, I've said this many times, when a soldier or a police officer or anyone who is sworn in to defend this nation and the Constitution of the United States, they always raise our hand and we say, we pledge to defend the United States of America and its Constitution from enemies, both foreign and domestic. And right now we have a series with domestic situations going on in this country that's very, very serious. We have had a free nation for 250 years, and as a result of that, we've had our rights that have been granted to us by the Constitution, and our inalienable rights to free speech, and our rights to assemble, and our rights for a free election. And many, many of those things are being taken away from us right now by this administration. Now, I know people will say I'm sounding off politically, and it's because I'm a Trumper or I'm a conservative Republican. Well, actually, it's because I'm a patriot. I'm looking at things with my eyes wide open, and I'm realizing we are in serious trouble in this country. There are things going on with the Democratic Party that have never happened in history. You look at what's happened in recent months and recent weeks. A few months ago, actually a couple of months ago, the press and all of the heads of the Democratic Party, Schumer, Pelosi, Harris, they all said that Joe Biden was perfectly fit. He's perfectly capable to run the country, to be president of the United States. And then they made the mistake of allowing him to go on a debate, a public debate. And millions of people saw with their own eyes that the press and the Democratic leaders had been lying to us for years. Clearly, this man is not able to be president of the United States. Okay, he's an elderly man, as I am. He's losing some faculties. There's nothing to be ashamed of. What is ashamed of is to recognize how much they've been lying to us and telling us the contrary. This is a man who sits in a position where, with one press of his button, could annihilate humanity. And that is something that needs much more than a part time president who goes to sleep because he's tired in the afternoon. And that is something that needs someone who has been elected by the people of the United States to be in that position. Well, the Democrats were holding their quasi uh, pre elections and to determine who was going to be their candidate. It was all predetermined in advance. It's going to be Joe Biden. They didn't allow anyone to run against him. And 18 million Democrats throughout the United States, in a number of various states, voted for him to be the next candidate to be reelected as President of the United States, Joe Biden. They also contributed $200 million to his campaign fund, Joe Biden. But suddenly, the powers that be, the backroom boys, decided, well, Joe Biden can't do it. He's going to lose the election. We have to do anything we can do to defeat Trump. So Joe Biden suddenly, overnight, on a weekend, after saying on Friday, I'm going to complete this campaign, I'm going to run, and he even said he's going to win, which is impossible. And on Sunday, he comes out with a letter saying that he is not going to go on. And furthermore, the backroom boys decide Kamala Harris is their number one pick for the top of the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris, who didn't receive one vote. When she ran for president in 2020, in her primary campaign race as a Democratic candidate, she didn't earn one electoral vote. Not one. She lost every primary she ran against. And Joe Biden decided to select her because of personality politics. He wanted to have a black female. Well, he got a black female. Nothing wrong with black females if they're competent, but she's not. She has proven over and over again after the last 3.5 years, she's not. What she is a party slang. She just says whatever they want her to say. She's told us for years Joe Biden was capable when he obviously was not. Okay, so now we're here where we are now. Now they've decided Kamala Harris is going to be the candidate for the Democratic Party. And suddenly, there was a show, Ingram Angle, and Laura Ingram had on the head of the FCC right after this occurred, and she asked him the question, well, what happens to this $200 million that these people donated to the Biden-Harris campaign? And he said it must all be returned to the people who donated it, because there is no longer a Biden-Harris campaign. There is now a Harris-Wells campaign. But at the time, it was just Harris. She wasn't even the official candidate yet. And they was changing, and the Democratic people were told it's illegal to take that money and use it elsewhere. But they took it, and miraculously, within a couple of days, they announced that Kamala Harris had over $200 million in donations in a couple of days. Basically, they stole the money from one pot to another, which they didn't have a right to do, not a legal right. They didn't ask anyone. They never made an attempt to say to the people who made those donations, can we use it elsewhere? They just did it. Okay, so that's break number one. Break number two. Now they come up and they decide she's the candidate. They didn't even have a convention yet, but they went back to the delegates, and there were over 1,800 of them that were committed to Joe Biden. And suddenly 1,000 of them have said, she's our candidate. So there will be no contest at the Democratic convention. There may be a contest outside. You remember in Chicago when there was that contest outside? I think we're going to have some kind of things like that again. We just saw it in New York, where the Democratic Party was having meetings, and the pro-Hamas groups outside were demonstrating and destroying things because they don't allow or agree with the Democratic Party in New York any longer. Well, one of the big mistakes that the Democrats had was they allowed the press to speculate that they might consider a Jewish man to be her running mate. And suddenly the world came to an end. Their anti-Semitism became very obvious, very clear. So we're coming into a Democratic convention next week, next Monday, I think it believes. It begins. And I think we are going to see some demonstrations, some violent demonstrations across the country. Will the Democrats do anything about it? Well, the running mate, when he was governor of Minnesota, he allowed the city of Milwaukee to virtually burn to the ground. The mayor of Milwaukee stated and said over and over again for 5 nights, please send the National Guard. And he refused to send them. And the city virtually burnt to the ground. Private properties, commercial businesses, a police station was burnt to the ground. Many, many people were injured. Many policemen were injured. Did their governor do anything about it? No, he said the National Guard, what good is it to send the National Guard? They're only cooks in uniform on weekends. This is the very same man who proudly says he wore the uniform of the National Guard for 27 years. And yet he disgraces them by making a comment like that and not doing what they are bound to do to protect the citizens of their state. He did nothing, absolutely nothing. But he's a whole story in and of itself. These are terrible, terrible times we're looking at here. In addition to all of these backroom shenanigans that they're doing, I've told you a number of times that they allowed, as you well know, while Kamala was the border czar, she allowed as many as 12 to 15 million people, illegals, into the United States. Most of them unvetted. Many of them, now we know, on the terrorist watch list. But they were allowed in. After all, She said they're not only allowed in the country, but they're allowed to Medicare, Social Security, education, housing, and the cost of billions and billions of dollars, which the federal government has been printing to sustain these people. While our cost of living goes up and our inflation goes up, and they constantly look backwards and blame it on you know who, while in his term, we had very low inflation, almost non existent. We had full employment. We had the greatest economy this nation has seen for all people, including minorities. The greatest economy that we've ever had in this nation was under Donald Trump. But they don't want to talk about that because the press hates him. All they want to do is accuse him of things and convict him of nonsense, fraud, and take a shot at him. Who knows how that happened? All we know is that the Secret Service didn't do their job, not at all. What they were supposed to do was being done by Homeland Security guards primarily, rather than Secret Service people who were trained for that. But that's another story once again. So what do we do here? We have 12 to 15 million immigrants coming through this country, and now 18 democratic states have agreed to give them driver's license, even though most of them can't speak English. Now you say to yourself, so what? So they have a driver's license. Driver's license in and of itself is not the problem. The problem is those states, most of them, have elected to send ballots in the mail to every registered resident who has a driver's license. And just like the city of Washington, D.C., where their government leaders decided it would be acceptable for all residents to vote. Now, mind you, I'm using the word resident, not citizens. They are allowing non citizens to vote in the elections in Washington, D.C. They are attempting to allow anyone with a driver's license, whether they are citizen or not, to vote in 18 of those states. What do you think is going to happen to this election? We keep talking about a free election, an honest election. There are people in the background here that have been working diligently for years on this plan to overthrow this election, to overthrow this country. Point in fact, the founding fathers decided in their wisdom that as the country grew, it would not be a fair state of affairs if the huge populous areas like the cities in New York City and Buffalo, Boston and Virginia, those large cities at the time of the colonization of the United States, had an imbalanced power over the vote to elect the federal government. So they put together what is known as the Electoral College. The Electoral College was a second means of voting in the government, primarily president and vice president of the United States. And those people were elected from the Electoral College. You had to have so many votes in any state where you have senators and House of Representatives, and those people will get an equal amount of bordering states so that collectively it wouldn't be just the population centers of the United States that would control and govern what happened, but all the people. The people in our current days, the people in Iowa with lower populations, the people in Montana and Wyoming and elsewhere, in the middle America, mainland America, would have an equal opportunity to vote in the government of the United States, as do those who live in New York City and San Francisco and wherever, you have those major populations. So there was a balance of government there, a balance of election there. Well, there's a man in California, a billionaire, by the name of John Kasich, who has decided 2 years ago now that the Electoral College should no longer exist. So he's put together a group of people, and they've gone around the United States, backrooming it. Now, in order to change the Electoral College by the Constitution, you have to have an amendment to the Constitution, which would take 2/3 of the states voting in favor of it, which they're never going to get. And they know they're never going to get that. So what are they doing about it? They're doing their backroom politics once again, just like they selected Kamala Harris. Now they have a backroom politics that's been going on for more than 2 years to change the Electoral College. How are they going to change the Electoral College? They're going to the various states around the United States who have minority groups of people, or pardon me, I don't mean that in terms of minority racial, I mean small groups of people. And they are dictating to them and convincing them that there should be a simple way, a referendum on the ballot box to allow for plurality vote. That means majority wins. Well, a majority wins is what they call a democracy. That means the people who are in majority dictate everything. The people who are in minority, whether they are minorities or just a different political persuasion, have no vote in what you're saying. They have no rule, they have no vote, they have no say in their government. And that's what you have in Venezuela. That's what you have in many countries around the world that have failed dismally. That's what a democracy really is. We keep talking about democracy in this country, but we're a constitutional republic. We must always remember that. We are a constitutional republic with free rights and eligible controls and safety for all people, not just the majority who have the power. So let's come back to the Electoral College. So what that means is if they could squeeze it in these states, they can get people to unwillingly vote for something that looks innocuous on these off-year registration things where 10 to 18% of the people come out to vote. And possibly they can change the electoral votes that way without it being known by the general people, because the press is never going to promote what's happening. They're never going to endorse it. The press is a carbon copy of Pravda in Russia. They are a carbon copy of it here in the United States. They're an arm of the Democratic Party. There is no free press any longer. So what's going on with this? Well, I have a video here I would like you to see. It's going to explain in detail how they have succeeded 76% of the way already. 76% of the votes they need, they have already amassed throughout the United States to change the Electoral College. While we're sleeping, we don't even know what's going on. The press is blind to it. They will not promote it. They will not say a word about it. But it's happening right under our eyes. It's happening here in this nation where we are supposed to be a free nation, freely educated, freely made aware of things, and the opportunity to speak our mind. And they're stripping that away. You know, I saw Jonathan Turley on TV the other night, a brilliant man. He's a law scholar. He's a professor of law at Georgetown University, and he's been a strong Democrat all of his life. But in recent years, he is recognizing how illegal the actions of the Biden administration and their dark state of people who are supporting it. This isn't just Joe Biden. It's the people in the White House who have come out of the Obama administration that are attempting to break the rules by circumventing the rules. And they are attempting to eliminate free speech in this nation. There is an undertow going on. That's another show, another story about how academia is now attempting to get free speech eliminated in this nation. Anyway, I'd like you to watch this video and see for yourself with the graphics what's going on in the Electoral College. And I'll come back and make comments afterwards.
Last week, the state legislature of Maine became the 17th in the nation to pass a bill which will effectively eliminate the Electoral College. Because you see, unbeknownst to most people, there is a serious effort in this country to make presidential elections a simple majority popular vote. And even though most people have never heard about this effort, well, it's actually already 76% complete, meaning that the Electoral College is truly at risk of getting completely scrapped in the next few years. This effort, it's officially called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, otherwise known as the NPVIC. And what it basically is, it's an agreement between the states that join to give their collective electoral votes to whichever candidate happens to win the popular vote at the national level. Let me briefly explain. Up on your screen is a map of the Electoral College votes by state. This is the most recent map based on the 2020 census results. Every state has Electoral College votes equal to the number of representatives that they have in Congress at the federal level. And so, for instance, the state of Texas, they have 2 senators as well as 38 members of the House, and therefore they have 40 votes total in the Electoral College. Now, the way that the Electoral College has evolved over the last 250 years is kind of a long story, but relevant to our discussion today, it's worth highlighting that every individual state gets to decide how they apportion their votes. meaning that the state legislatures in each state, they get to decide how they divvy out their electoral college votes. And so, at this moment, the way that it works in practice is that whichever candidate wins a plurality of votes in a given state, meaning whoever wins the popular vote in a state, they get that state's electoral college votes. This is the way it works for every state except for two. Nebraska and Maine, they actually split up their electoral college votes based on congressional districts. And they can do this, again, because states can decide how to divvy up their votes. The electoral college system itself, it was established by Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution. But states, they retain the ability to run their own elections and to decide how they apportion their electoral college votes. It's an aspect of our federalist system. And so, opponents of the electoral college system, they have used this as a sort of loophole to try and destroy it. Because you see, if you wanted to get rid of the electoral college system in the normal way, you would have to amend the U.S. Constitution, which is realistically not possible. There is not enough support to get rid of the electoral college by passing an actual amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And so, instead, what opponents of the electoral college system have been doing is that they've been working to get rid of it using the back door, by having individual states sign up for something known as the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, or the NPVIC. And the NPVIC is an agreement between states to give their collective electoral college votes to whichever candidate happens to win the national popular vote. Quote, "A California millionaire named John Koza is trying to undo the electoral college. He is leading and funding the National Popular Vote campaign. Their plan is to get state governments to ignore how their own citizens vote in presidential elections and instead get them to cast their electoral votes based on the national popular vote. If it works, this will be like getting rid of the electoral college, but without actually amending the Constitution. NPV only takes effect if it is joined by enough states that they control 270 electoral votes, which would then control the outcome of all future presidential elections. If that happens, and if the courts do not strike it down, big cities will gain more political power at the expense of everyone else." And so what's been happening in this country since about 2006 is that state legislatures in blue states, they've been passing these NPVIC laws. At the moment, 16 states, as well as the District of Columbia, have successfully passed the NPVIC laws, which are now on the books. For your reference, the states are as follows. You have Maryland, New Jersey, Illinois, Hawaii, Washington State, Massachusetts, Vermont, California, Rhode Island, New York, Connecticut, Colorado, Delaware, New Mexico, Oregon, Minnesota, and then also Washington, D.C. In total, this block represents 205 electoral college votes, which is 76% of the necessary total. And so, because they have not reached that 270 threshold, these NPVIC laws, they are on the books in those states, but they're dormant. They haven't yet gone into effect. However, if and when enough states join this compact to add up to 270 votes, the laws will be triggered, and overnight, the Electoral College will effectively be eliminated. Because at the very moment when this National Popular Vote Compact has 270 votes total, the states that have signed on will automatically shift the way that their system works to give their Electoral College votes to whoever happens to win the National Popular Vote. And so, the moment that happens, the U.S. president will suddenly be decided by a simple majority vote. Whoever is able to win the masses in big cities will be able to win the presidency, while the people living in the rural countryside will essentially become serfs, unable to affect policy at the national level moving forward. But here's the thing. While we're not there quite yet, looking across the whole country, it's actually feasible that within the next few years, probably within the next 4 or 5, maybe 6 years, enough states might join the compact to activate the change. That's because right now, the NPVIC is missing only 65 electoral college votes. However, at the same time, you have 11 states that have NPVIC bills working through their state legislatures. And these 11 states, they together represent 101 electoral college votes. And here's the status generally of these 11 states. Just last week, over in Maine, the NPVIC bill passed both the state Senate as well as the state Assembly and is now sitting on the governor's desk awaiting signature. The governor there has 3 more days to either sign the bill or to veto it. However, if she doesn't do anything, it'll automatically become law without her signature in 3 days. Then you have Nevada, where the NPVIC bill also passed both the state Senate as well as the state House. However, over in Nevada, this type of bill actually does not need to be signed by the governor. Instead, because this bill amends the state constitution, it must pass the legislature again in the year 2025, and then afterwards, there must be a statewide vote in order for it to be enacted. And this whole process, it might take about 2 years. And then in the other 9 states that you can see up on your screen, they all have NPVIC bills going through the committee process in the state Senate, the state Assembly, or both. And so we'll have to wait and see how this process plays itself out in those states. But until then, you really do have to admire this type of a scheme. Objectively speaking, it is incredibly smart, using a backdoor way to get rid of the Electoral College by just having enough states join a bloc to add up to 270 votes and then agree to give those votes to whoever wins the popular vote. In terms of a strategy, it is quite literally brilliant. Although, obviously, the end result will be something that the framers of this country wished would never happen. The obliteration of the Electoral College alongside a shift towards a direct democracy, something, again, that the Founding Fathers feared.
I hope that opened your eyes. It certainly scared the dickens out of me. When you see how far along they've come, how far below we have fallen from a free democracy, a free country here in this country, how quickly a handful of people can manipulate the press, manipulate the education system, manipulate the law, manipulate our very government. And we have people in the government today who are making rules and decisions who are bureaucrats. They've never been elected to these positions. You didn't give them permission to decide how your tax dollars are going to work, or how your family is going to drive, or what kind of cars you can have, or what kind of meat you can eat. You didn't give them the vote to determine for you all of your lifestyle, and yet they're doing it every day. They have caused inflation. They have caused rift between the people of the United States. There is a minority group of people who have given all the attention in this country, and they pay it up like there's, if you were to look at any media today, you would think that gays, homosexuals, and trannies were 50% of our population, because they're everywhere in every every advertisement, in every movie, in every television show. The laws are slanted towards them. Males can get in a boxing ring with a woman, and it's okay with them because he declares himself to be a woman. What kind of nonsense is that? Men, this candidate for the vice presidency, when he was governor of the state of Minnesota, he declared that there should be tampons in boys' bathrooms. What kind of nonsense is that? And that's a minority of the people. 5 to 8% of the people in the United States fall in those categories. And yet you would think it's a majority vote. It's a bloc. Not so, folks. Not so. It's just like this green agenda that they have, that everybody's being told this weather is changing dramatically, and the ozone is changing dramatically, and carbon dioxide is killing off mankind. Well, they keep saying that, and they keep saying that, and they say follow the science, but they never talk about the real science. The real science will tell you that carbon dioxide is 0.03% of the atmosphere. 0.03. That's less than 1% of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide. And 30% of that has been created by human mankind over the entire span of man on Earth. Where's the dilemma? Where's the disaster? It's another distraction to take control, for big government to take control. Well, there is an answer to that, and I believe this is the answer to it. I wanted you to see another show that I think is very valuable to see and understand. And yes, as I said in the beginning, I'm a Christian, I'm a patriot, and I'm going to vote for Trump. And I'm going to show you why, if you would indulge me and just watch this next tape. I'm sure you will agree with me.
Cold, long-forgotten land, separated by the war. The common man is breaking down the walls. On a golden coast beyond the sun, the Father's been set free. He will live to see the day hatred falls. And I don't know why it took so long to see. Life is the right to be free. And I know the touching people where the bullets used to fly. Children learn what it means to smile. There's a beam of light at the other end that'll chase away the dark, where sons and daughters died without a trial. And I don't know why it took so long to see life is the right to be free. And I know the dream has just begun. And I know there are battles to be won. But I know the world can change. The world can change. And I know the dream has just begun. And I know there are battles to be won. But I know the world can change. The world can change. The world can change. The world can change. The world can
Okay, well, now, if that didn't really tell you that there's a better day coming tomorrow, there's a new future, we can change the world, we can really change the world. That was a famous singer that created that song, Benny, and he wrote it and sang it many, many years ago, and it's been adapted for this by his late wife, his widow. I'm sorry, his widow. He's now passed away, but it's so fitting, and I think anyone who watches that can recognize that there is an opportunity here. All we have to do as Americans is stand on our rights as Americans. Speak out. Tell everyone you know about the truth. Tell everyone you know that we must vote this time. You cannot sit on the side and say someone else will do it. Everyone must vote. Every church must say to their people out there, render unto Caesar what is Caesar and render unto God what is God. What is Caesar's is the vote. You must go and vote. If you expect to have a free nation, you have to stand for it. You have to stand on the line and say, I am an American and I have my right to vote. And vote correctly. Go out and vote, because if you don't, for every vote that is lost, there are two in the shadows that they're going to manipulate somehow. Vote. Be a poll guard. Volunteer to go down and be on the polls. Go down and volunteer to see what's happening with all those mail-in ballots. Are they getting in the slot? Are people actually delivering them? Are they being counted? Are they being accounted for? Are they real? Have they been signed correctly? Now, that's a heavy burden to put on an individual, but the groups of people that know how to do that will educate you and train you how to do it. Step up. Be an American. Be one of those Minutemen that came out of the trees 250 years ago to defend our rights so that we become a free nation, the shining light on the hill, the finest nation ever on the face of the earth, done more for mankind than any nation ever in history. And I tell you once again, folks, speak up. If you like what you hear here today, make a comment. If you don't like it, make a comment also. That's what Free America is about. If you disagree with me and you want to dispute it, write in and let us know. I'll have you on the show. We'll have a conversation. This is a free nation. This is a free show. And I say what I tell you every time, every single time. You have a story to tell, and no one can tell it but you. I have told you today my story. I have told you why I'm so passionate about this country. And I've told you why one of my greatest scriptures ever is, "Be strong, my soul, march on." If we stand down weakly, we lose. If we stand firmly, God will carry us through. So get somebody you know today, grab them in a big bear hug, and tell them you love them. Tell them you love them. May be the only time they hear those words. Tell them you love them. And I'm quite sure God does also. So God bless you all, and God bless this great country of ours. Goodbye.